Recognize this barn? I'll give you a hint. It's located at the Huffman Prairie Flying Field at the end of the runway in Area A of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's where the Wright brothers stored their Wright Flyer aircraft. At the time, the land was owned by a Dayton banker named Torrance Huffman, who allowed the brothers to use this pasture for their flight experiments. But it wasn't always easy, since this was an active pasture, and often the brothers had a lot of trouble moving the cattle and horses to safety before conducting their experiments. But it was here, in 1905, that the Wright brothers mastered the principles of controlled flight and developed the world's first practical airplane. I hope you enjoy this next keynote.
Hi, my name is Bill McGuffey from Frontier Technology Incorporated, a small business headquartered in Beaver Creek, Ohio, specializing in the Small Business Innovative Research Phase 3 solution. I have the pleasure today of introducing our next speaker, Mr. Nick Shalon. If you have questions during this talk, please submit them using the dialog box to the right. Mr. Nick Shalon is appointed as the first Air Force Chief Software Officer under Dr. William Roper, the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. He also serves as the co-lead for the Department of Defense Enterprise DevSec Ops initiative with the Department of Defense Chief Information Office. Prior to his current position, Mr. Shalon was a special advisor for cloud, cybersecurity, and DevSec Ops at the Department of Defense, OSD A&S, and special advisor for cybersecurity and chief architect for cyber.gov at the Department of Homeland Security. He designed the new robust and innovative and holistic .gov cybersecurity architecture. In addition to his public service, Mr. Shalon went on to found 12 companies and has over 20 years of domestic and international experience with strong technical and subject matter expertise in cybersecurity, software development, public innovation, governance, risk management, and compliance. Specifically, these fields include cloud computing, cybersecurity, DevSecOps, big data, multi-touch, mobile, IoT, mixed reality, virtual reality, and wearables. Again, please welcome Mr. Nick Shalon.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for having me. We're very excited to be able to share today some of the work we've been doing with Platform One and ABMS with edge computing and moving the Department of Defense to DevSecOps. We'll go over a few key slides for you to be able to see kind of the importance of what we're doing and why timeliness is foundational to the success of the department, and bringing our ability to react to change and events is obviously foundational to the success of our teams across the department. So to get us quickly started, we need to understand why timeliness matter, and we need to rapidly adapt to challenges, whether it's for AI, machine learning, deep learning, whether it's for cybersecurity reasons. Timeliness matters even more so than ever. And the difference between days, weeks, or months, or years obviously will be very impactful in the delivery of our capabilities. At the same time, we need to work as a team. And obviously for us, it is a pretty large team and a team that has to deal with quite a lot of different technologies, with quite a few sensors that we have to bring with us, that we need to bring all the way to space. And again, these sensors with all this modularity and different pieces need to be replaceable, need to be modular, and need to be agile. And that is critical to be able to move with all these people's help across multiple nations on a lot of different DoD programs at the pace of relevance. And really, the DevSecOps initiative was created to do just that. It is an enterprise DoD-wide initiative with DoD CIO, ANS, and all of the services. And we brought two teams, Cloud One and Platform One. Cloud One is the Cloud Office team, having access to both Amazon and Azure, and classified clouds and SAP clouds as well, like Fences. And we brought Platform One, which is the DevSecOps team that is bringing this DevSecOps managed capability to bring the modularity and enabling reuse so we can move faster, stronger together. And the first aspect was to make sure we would not be locked in or limited to cloud environments. And so for that, we use Kubernetes, which is part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Kubernetes was initially created by Google and was donated to the CNCF. And containers, you can think of containers as reusable Lego blocks, very much like Lego blocks. We can now write software and accredit containers that can be reused across the department at all classification levels. And for that, we built what we call the Iron Bank, which is a centralized artifact repository of the department where we harden and centrally accredit containers. We select both open source and commercial tools, but we also can bring mission software as containers and can centrally accredit them. And Repo One is a source code side of that. So Repo One is a source code. Iron Bank is the signed containers that can be consumed by DoD programs and the entire world, really, because we are open sourcing this back to the world, and our partners and the DEB can come and consume everything we're talking about here. It is all based on zero trust and the concept of a sidecar container security stack. We'll talk about what that is in this presentation. We are also using behavior detection, which is AI machine learning driven, not just the basic scanning of signature and CVEs. And really, the beauty here is that we are bringing zero trust down to the container level. We'll talk about that as well. On top of that, we're moving from a monolithic architecture and applications down to microservices with the service mesh with ISTIO. We'll talk about what a service mesh is. And we are bringing function as a service. We're bringing AI machine learning, deep learning capabilities with Kubeflow as well. And Kubeflow is also part of the open source community and brings the best of breed AI machine learning, deep learning tools. We created this concept of a continuous authority to operate, continuous ATO. And the continuous ATO is about accrediting the factory, the software factory, and the gates within that DevSecOps pipeline. And what comes out of the factory is accredited across DoD and can be released multiple times a day. And that brings us the timeliness piece we talked about. And because we're a small organization, we have to train 100,000 people within a year. And so we are bringing self-learning capabilities across the department to be able to bring unbiased content from the Linux Foundation, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and O'Reilly the books to help people keep up with all these innovation across industry and give them time during the day to go and put it to good use by having access to a cloud sandbox as well. So really, when I look at the complexity of all this and I look at what we're sharing, we wanted to open source back and really make this widely available. And so we created this website, software.af.mil. So if you go to airforce.af.mil, you're going to be able to see all of the documents, videos, training content, the links to Repo One, Iron Bank, and all of the different engagements we have. If you want to learn more about the Platform One team and the Cloud One team and how to be onboarded and use their services, everything is there as well. But there's a lot of content and video as well, and the reference design and the architecture documents and a ton of information on that website. So a lot of people ask us, why did we pick Kubernetes and containers? Well, the first aspect was to make sure we would not be locked into a cloud provider or to a specific product. And Kubernetes is an orchestration tool for containers that is abstracting the containers from the environment. So you can run the same containers on the jet, on the bomber, on the cloud, on different environments. And that really brings us a ton of flexibility when it comes to edge deployment. And we can run on any kind of hardware, we can run on a lot of different systems, and that really gives us the abstraction and flexibility that we need. And that was the prime decision as to why we picked Kubernetes. On top of that, containers are immutable, and we can centrally accredit and harden both open source COTS and GOTS, and really centrally do that at scale and continuously update them and patch them across all classification levels within 4 hours, and brings us a ton of benefits when it comes to cyber. And of course, Kubernetes brings us the resiliency, because Kubernetes is an orchestration stack that self-heal containers that crash, so they can automatically be restarted. It's also bringing baked-in security with that automatic injection of a sidecar. So a sidecar, for people that don't know what a sidecar container is a small container that runs alongside the rest of the containers. And each container gets a sidecar, very much like a sidecar of a motorcycle. The sidecar is just tagging along all of the containers, and we can inject cyber capabilities there to be able to really bring the behavior detection, the zero trust, and that's how we bring a lot of the baked-in security. So it's injected as a sidecar that is alongside the containers, so we don't have to coordinate with the development teams of the different containers. It's injected automatically, and we can update it centrally without having to coordinate releases. So that helps also decouple and not have to coordinate releases across teams and across containers. On top of that, the container Lego block aspect brings us this swappable bits that brings us the load balancing, routing. We can upgrade containers with no downtime. And we use the concept of infrastructure as code and GitOps, which is complete automation. Everything is code. We'll talk about that again in the next few slides, to completely automate, push button deploy the entire stack. So there is no drift between environments. There's complete automation, complete understanding of what's going on. And Kubernetes brings that auto scaling aspect where we can automatically scale based on compute or memory needs as well. Of course, we talked about the abstraction piece, but the complexity of a DevSecOps stacks, when you have all these different tools, and that's just an example. We have 200 plus tools, so you can imagine the complexity when you have a dev, a test, staging, production environments across multiple classification levels. You now have to go and update all these different software bits, and you don't want to do that with virtual machines. You want to do that with automation. You want to do that at scale, and you don't want to have drift between environments, between classification levels, between dev, test, staging, and prod. And so containers is really the only way to make this successful. And so we containerize every aspect of the DevSecOps stack. We don't run virtual machines. Everything is containerized. So we can centrally update these containers and push them across environments, push them across classification levels as well. So the DevSecOps layers are also foundational to the success of the ISTIO. And so when you have the infrastructure layer, we decouple that edge cloud or embedded system, and then what is on top of that is inherited. And so we are pushing then the platform layer with Kubernetes, the continuous integration, continuous delivery layer with the containers, with the complete CI/CD stack containerized, and then we have the service mesh. And the service mesh is really the managing the east and west traffic between the containers, and that is really how we end up bringing zero trust. The service mesh is able to whitelist access and traffic between containers. So if container A needs to talk to container B, we have to whitelist that traffic. And then the application layer inherits all of these different layers, and what's left on the cyber side and the application side is very small, and that facilitate the accreditation process for the teams, and we can move much faster and release these application layer containers much faster by having the inheritance of all the cyber controls by the sidecar container security stack that continuously monitors the entire environment. So that's obviously game changing for our teams, and that gives us that central team with Platform One that can help all these teams and program offices and the DIB, other agencies. We have about 12 agencies outside of the DoD using some of the Platform One work. We have all the software teams across DoD, and Platform One was named by DoD CIO as the first DevSecOps approved managed service for the DoD. When you see the team and the complexity of the work we're doing, we're helping some of the largest programs between the Space Force and the Air Force and the DoD with programs like Aegis in the Navy, GBSD, Jake, the Joint Air Center, F-35, ABMS, Unified Platform. So we're really touching every aspect of the DoD's mission, and that is really critical to our scale, is to work together and bring these services that you see centrally, so teams don't have to reinvent the wheel. When you look at some of the basic services that Platform One provide, we have Repo One, which is a source code repo. That's where we have the source code of the containers, the infrastructure as code, the Kubernetes distributions. We have multiple options there. And then so that's Repo One. Then we have Iron Bank with now actually 200 containers now available already today on Iron Bank, which are the signed containers and approved containers. And again, all the links are there for you to go and see, and anyone can have access. You don't need a CAC, or you don't need a special access. Anyone can create an account. And then we are bringing multiple options when it comes to Kubernetes. We have Day2IQ Convoy, Rancher, OpenShift, VMware, so you name it, and we have these different options, and we can instantiate Kubernetes anywhere from a weapon to the edge, to classified clouds, to on-premise environments. So that gives us a lot of options and flexibility when it comes to the deployment of the DevSecOps stack. The two main services on top of that we bring with Platform One are the Party Bus and the Big Bang, and you can see we have funny, cool names. The Party Bus is the multi-tenant environment. That's where ABMS is doing its work. Anyone can get access to any DoD program can get access to the Party Bus, and have a development environment, a testing environment, staging and production at multiple classification levels, and the cost is per developer per month. They inherit the reciprocity, and they don't get to pick the tools; they just get to use them. But it's a great option for teams that want to get started, or teams that just want to write code. The Big Bang is a dedicated instance of Platform One. That's where larger programs like GBSD or Jake that want to have a dedicated instance. They want to pick the tools, they want to customize the experience, and they want to control it. And we can bring that either as a managed service or just as a service managed by the program. But we bring them the continuous ISTIO, we help them with the accreditation, we bring them the automation, of course, and all the hardening and all the containers as well. We also created the first cloud native access point, which is moving the CAP, the cloud access point, to the cloud to be elastic. So we can bring kind of the access to the cloud without having to VPN to Nipper. It's accessible at impact level 2, 4, and 5, which is unclassified clouds, where we can have VDI options or thick endpoints, including mobile, bring on device, government owned, contractor owned devices, and have single sign-on with multi-factor authentication and DoD PKI options across the entire stack. And that streamlines access, particularly during this COVID nightmare, where we need to have easy access to the clouds without having to VPN to Nipper. Training is foundational. We believe that the success of the teams will be about the training, and really continuous learning is really the key here with DevSecOps moving so fast. And so we wanted to bring self-learning capabilities, and we have this website where we have a lot of content curated, but we also have the Learning Hub with O'Reilly and Linux Foundation and Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And we really wanted to have that self-learning option where teams can go and learn and spend time as needed to catch up or to look at new things. But we also have all the way to a 2 months onboarding where Platform One will embed people into the program office to help them be able to get started with DevSecOps and define what the minimal viable product will be and deliver that minimal viable product within 2 months in production. So it's something tangible at the end of the 2 months as well. So some of the game-changing aspect of the Platform One team was to also kind of bring the contract vehicles, and DevSecOps was needs a lot of different licenses, talents, tools, and so we created the DevSecOps basic ordering agreements, the BOAs, and we have 3 BOAs: the cloud services, the DevSecOps licenses, and the DevSecOps services. And that lets us within 30 days buy any tool or.
Hey, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Mr. Shalon's connection. But if you wouldn't mind maybe using the chat feature to address some of the questions that you have while we're looking to kind of get him back. We do have several questions that we would like to tee up with him once he's back online.
I'm back.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so sorry. I don't know what's going on. I guess my connection is usually stable, but I don't know what's going on today. I guess that's the issue with internet. Too many people are being remote. And I have 4 connections here, but whatever. I guess we'll go to the next slide. We talked about the contract vehicles. Some of the key ingredients for DevSecOps, and yes, please, if you have questions, if I guess I'll check the chat and see whenever you have some, I can take some of them. Some of the DevSecOps key ingredients are really the automation we're bringing, and I'll go to the next slide, which has some of the microservice aspect, right? So we talked about containers and sidecar container, but once you move to creating a monolithic application into microservices and taking that complex application and moving maybe to different programming languages, and now different microservices are using different programming languages. You don't want to coordinate releases. I issued a memo highly discouraging the use of safe and having release planning and release trains. All this stuff is outdated and does not align with the DevSecOps mindset of releasing software in a decoupled fashion. And so we wanted to bring the service mesh, which is really game changing, and that's how the commercial side is moving so fast to bring new capabilities to life, including companies like SpaceX and others. Without a service mesh, you just can't release software rapidly. And the service mesh will decouple all the features of service discovery, API management, routing, zero trust, encryption, authentication. So instead of having to update bits inside of your different microservices and having to coordinate releases between teams, now you can simply have a service mesh that is running as a sidecar container, so it can be updated across all the teams without having to coordinate that release. And that microservice will then use a service mesh to authenticate and communicate, and you don't have to have all these special secret sauce pieces inside of each programming language and each microservice that you're going to be supporting. So it's a great way to decouple those features, but it's a way to enable the east and west traffic and share information and authenticate and encrypt. For example, the service mesh automatically injects a mutual TLS tunnel across all the communication. So even if my teams build containers that don't use encryption, I don't care, because the service mesh will inject that mutual TLS tunnel encryption by default. So it's going to be there regardless. That is really game changing to make sure that the baked in security that we need and the zero trust enforcement is there day one. The concept of infrastructure as code is also game changing. We are using that to make sure there is no drift between environments. You don't want to have changes made in production manually that is shifting you and drifting you away from your source of truth, which is your source code. Your source code should always be your source of truth in DevSecOps, and you should always push changes back into source code so you can then use the pipeline to deploy it in production. And so IST, which is infrastructure as code, brings you that ability to have immutable, replicable, automated instantiation of your stack, no human in production. That reduces the attack surface. You have less insider threat risk, and everything is code. Your networking, your configuration changes, your tests, everything is in code. That is really critical to have that central source of truth. And GitOps is the evolution of infrastructure as code, which is taking it to the next level, making Git the single source of truth of everything. And that includes your infrastructure, your platform, and your applications and containers. And everything is code, and that creates that desired state in code where you have great auditability and compliance capabilities, but you can roll back, you can update, upgrade. You have complete change management and configuration management and enforcement, so you can look at how many set of eyes on code do you have to approve code changes to make sure you have that change management board baked into your source code changes. You have disaster recovery because now you can just back up your source code and your databases, and you have a full backup of your system. And then you have the Kubernetes cluster that will pull from Git instead of a CI/CD tool pushing to production, which is a cyber risk because they have the keys to your production environments. In this case, the CI/CD tool won't have the keys because the Kubernetes cluster pulls from Git multiple times a day as needed. And we use Argo CD for this, which is also part of the CNCF as well. So the continuous ISTIO is game-changing for the department, and the concept around it is to accredit the platform and the process of that platform. And with mandated gates, we have testing gates, cyber gates, change management gates, and the software coming out of the process and the factory is accredited to be running in production on a platform that's also accredited to have that cyber continuous monitoring stack that we talked about with a sidecar concept. And then we authorize teams to use the platform so they can use existing platforms or build a new platform if need be. But the beauty there is with platform one, we're an authorized platform, and we can authorize teams to jump on that platform and benefit from that continuous ISTIO so they don't have to build all that stack from scratch, making them start in a very short amount of time. And the gates are, change management gates, cyber gates, and testing gates to make sure you're passing the requirements to be able to push software to production. So this is the email if you want to reach out to us, and if you have more questions. But of course, we'll be taking your questions now as well.
Mr. Shalon, so we got a couple of questions, but first of all, I wanted to thank you for your participation, and sorry for the hiccups on the technical piece, but it did not impact the content. I think folks really appreciated you taking the time to deliver that. We've got a lot of questions here, specifically around how do you see DevSecOps and the movement towards that being a standard with the kind of cyber authorization workforce, and how do we mesh the two from a continuity of operations perspective, sir?
So I'm also now the chair of the DSOG, the DoD Security Authorization Working Group, which is for the DevSecOps subgroup. So we created a DevSecOps subgroup as part of the DSOG to be able to address some of these challenges in terms of training our AOs, ISSMs, SCAs, making sure they understand what a continuous ISTIO is, making sure we can educate people on Kubernetes and containers and all that kind of stuff. So we have multiple teams now working with the DoD CIO and DISA to push that guidance. It's going to be out by the end of October, maybe early November. We have a lot of publications that are going to come through: continuous ATO guidance, Kubernetes digs. So there's going to be a lot container hardening guide. So there's going to be a lot of information out there to help the teams understand better how cyber play into all of this, and particularly the continuous ATO guide brings that mapping back to RMF and what we already know and how we automated the process. So there's a lot of great stuff coming. I can tell you we are briefing already some of the key AOs that are accrediting some of our systems. We have about 27 AOs working with us across DoD already using the DevSecOps capability. And so with Platform 1, we have that DoD-wide enterprise ATO, and that is really game-changing as well.
Great, thank you, sir. Next question. So one of the participants is asking, are we building our way to a bring your own device NIPR network? It seems that we're moving a lot of capabilities to cloud platforms, and it feels that a bring your own device network seems to be inevitable at this point. What are your thoughts regarding that statement?
Yeah, so although we are using government clouds, I credit, so it's not just any cloud, but you're right. I guess we're moving a lot to the cloud with both Amazon and Azure government. We have full control of these clouds though. So Platform 1 is working with Cloud 1 to really centrally assess and accredit and manage all these services. We don't use a lot of SaaS cloud offerings because we don't want to be locked into a SaaS provider that's often hosted on an impact level that will not let us bring more critical data, right? We want to be able to obviously bring the same capabilities on the classified clouds, on the secret and top secret side as well. So we don't want to have drifts between the experiences of the end user between unclassed, secret, and top secret workloads. At the same time, we want to, even more so with the virus situation, we want to make sure anyone can connect from anywhere, particularly from home. And so we are actively building a zero trust stack that will allow us to understand better the device state. And we created a cloud native access point, which is going to become the default way for the Air Force to access Office 365 and emails and all that kind of stuff. And that will let us have different type of devices, whether it's mobile, whether it's desktop, laptops, and based on the state of the device, you can have different kind of access, right? So if your device is a GFE device, or if it's a bring your own device, and if it's not patched or if it's not updated, then you have less access to things depending on that device cyber posture, and that will really give us a lot of flexibility when it comes to whitelisting access to resources on the cloud and on NIPR. So in effect, we are kind of moving to that zero trust mesh of things by having both device enforcement tying back to the identity of the user to make sure the component risk of the device and the user identity and what he's supposed to have access to is then taken into consideration for whitelisting access to resources.
Great, thank you for that, Mr. Shalon. Next question is kind of specific to the logistics and sustainment capabilities, but what do you see as the current roadmap for building an enterprise logistics and sustainment capability that's based on this modern technology stack and this delivery method?
So we have a lot of engagements with different teams. Of course, the SWAG in the Air Force has been a prime partner with Hill and Tinker and really creating camps. So we have Ski Camp, we have Thunder Camp. I was talking this morning, even in Florida, we might end up with Beach Camp. So we have so many teams starting to spread that DevSecOps mindset culture across the department, both also with engagement with what we call DevStar, which is how do we automate DevSecOps for OT, DT, airworthiness, nuclear surety, and bringing all this together to remove these bottlenecks, remove these impediments. And so really what's been interesting for me has been the fact that we have all these pockets, and now we want to scale and grow these pockets across the Air Force and the DoD to make sure we get to a point where this is meaningful enough to truly start disrupting and changing the way we conduct business. And when it comes to sustainment, we kind of banned this word in software. The Defense Innovation Board call this software is never done, so we call it continuous engineering instead. That's why we renamed the swag as a software engineering and not just sustainment centers anymore, because we don't believe that software is sustained. We believe software is continuously engineered. And so there's a lot of training culture shift, helping shift people to the left, making sure that we bring our test centers, we bring nuclear surety and airworthiness teams, and have that baked in hardware in the loop testing with the DevSecOps pipeline on premise, where we can push software, push tests with complete automation. If you look at SpaceX, they're able to do 17,000 build of software a day and 3 full hardware in the loop testing a day to make sure that the software behaves the exact same way on the hardware.
Great, sir. Thank you. We have another bent towards the COTS arena. So for COTS vendors who sell open standards-based capabilities but not open source, which can extend on Platform One, can you talk to the process of getting our products to market?
Yeah, so we have a container onboarding guide. So if you go on the software.app.mil website under DSOP and documents, you're going to find the container onboarding guide to be able to push your software into the Iron Bank. You don't have to give the source code of your software, first of all. So if you're closed source, that's no problem. What you do need to have in place is some way to manage your licenses. What we don't do is we don't track your licenses for you. So like any software distribution capability, you need to make sure you have a license mechanism to make sure that people using your container will be paying you your software license fees. And so when you look at companies, we have plenty of companies that are closed source on the repo today. We have 80 plus companies pushing containers directly to the Iron Bank. The process is pretty simple. Some companies do it within 2 to 4 weeks. Some take a year. Depends on priorities, of course. But at the end of the day, the process is pretty straightforward. If you don't have containers, it's a little bit harder if you need to move from virtual machines. But even that, we see companies do this in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and push us the containers. And then you're DoD-wide accredited, and now you're part of the DevSecOps marketplace, and people can just buy your licenses. All you need to make sure is you need to make sure all your dependencies are scanned, and we use Twistlock and Anchor for scanning, but all that is in the documentation. You'll see the process step by step. You do have to have a container. We only accept containers, so that's going to be the way forward now. So that's something to embrace. You need to jump on the container wagon. It's fairly straightforward. The key aspect will be to make sure that you scan your software. You need a license mechanism if you don't want people to just use your software. Of course, without paying your license fees, you need to be able to have some type of license key file that will only activate the software if the key is there. Some companies have either a free version and a paid version. And if you don't have the key, then you can just run the free version. If you have the key, you get the paid feature of the software. That's a great way also to get people started and start consuming some of your product, getting hooked, if you will, and buying then the upgrades to get the support and maintenance and the different features you can bring. So that's a great model as well. So having a license mechanism is a great way to achieve that as well.
All right, great. Thanks, sir. I think we got time for maybe 2 more questions. Here's a rather long read, but it's basically around the sustainment piece of it. So as applications are being developed and deployed into the environment for operational use, what is the sustainment strategy for management, updates, and changes to newly developed capabilities? What is the ultimate management strategy to control application sprawl?
Yeah, I don't think we have all the answers. I think there is a balance that needs to be found between too much flexibility and not enough flexibility, right? We don't want to have millions of containers doing the same thing at the same time. We don't want to have a one-size-fits-all approach where we're mandating the use of the wrong technology and preventing the right approach to succeed. And so you want to find that balance between too much oversight, not enough oversight. Right now, honestly, we're at the point where we want to really help people build their mission software, reuse containers, reuse the basic things that they are rebuilding, like very simple, like CAC authentication, right? How many times do we have to pay contractors to come and build CAC authentication mechanism when we have now a container that does just that? So let's just use that container, right? So it is free and it's already accredited. So there are plenty of things like that we need to think about. When it comes to sustainment, though, the vision is if you move to a DevSecOps mindset, right, the key aspect then is about the team that usually build that container, that capability is the same team that continuously update it and continuously engineer that capability. So it's never sustained or maintained by a different group outside of that initial team. Now, sometimes the Air Force or the DoD is really designing silos, and there is this throwing over the fence between the O&M and the sustainment side, and that's why we're moving to a single color of money. We have a couple of pilots right now with Congress to move to try this software color of money, so we don't have sustainment, R&D, and O&M, and we can have that seamless DevSecOps line of funding to make sure that the software is continuously updated and the same team can be in charge of it throughout its life cycle.
Great, thank you, sir. So final question, maybe as we get into more of a user community perspective. So how do we reframe the discussion around traditional waterfall development from a user perspective in defining requirements for a DevSecOps or a Kubernetes type of development environment? Do you have any insights that maybe could help our requirements generators or our customers for a lot of these products reframe their paradigm?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference is a lot of people misunderstand Agile as, hey, we're not going to have requirements anymore, we're just going to wing stuff and hope for the best. That is not Agile, right? That's just broken Agile. That's people that don't know Agile, that are trying to put it to use. That is not what Agile should be. The key relationship between the development team and the product owner, so the requirement person becomes the product owner and is supposed to continuously be engaged every 2 weeks in the backlog grooming, which is how we don't select and prioritize the features and the backlog to make sure that we have that that well understood time frame and priorities. And the key is to have the big requirements as themes, and then down to epics, down to user stories, and not from day one digging into every little thing, but really having that broader roadmap with themes, and then go down to epics, and then go down to user stories. We have a whole training on that, and we're going to be pushing a lot of training for the acquisition teams in DoD to be able to really do a deep dive with a real use case on how do you take your big requirements, maybe coming from your end user, from your joint staff, down to themes that are then cut into epics, and then in the 2 weeks cycle of sprints, cut into user stories with your team, and you can prioritize that backlog. And in effect, you are continuously involved in that grooming process. So it's not once every 5 years, it's not once every 3 years, it's a continuous process. So for the requirements people out there, you get much more granular access and visibility on the work being delivered and the prioritization, and you can change your mind and learn based on your feedback and the deployment of your software into production more rapidly. You can learn, and you have room to understand what's going on. Maybe things change around us. Maybe we have new technologies coming out, and you can now reprioritize and jump on that opportunity to start embracing it. And that really gets you into a world of possibilities. And this is what Agile is about. It is not about no requirements, no visibility. It's the strict opposite when it's done right.
Well, great. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Shalon. I know the audience really appreciated your participation in the WITS conference, and it's a lot of our gratitude for taking the time out of your busy schedule to present the topic today. So thank you very much for that.
Sure, thanks for having me.